El webinar d'avui, on parlarem de l'accés al canal retail al mercat del Regne Unit per productes d'alimentació i begudes. Aquest webinar d'avui es dividirà en 3 intervencions. Per una banda tenim l'empresa Mission Ventures, una empresa que està radicada al Regne Unit, que ajuda a capacitar empreses d'aquest sector per accedir al mercat. En segon lloc, tindrem la intervenció de l'Òscar Martí, el director de l'oficina d'Acció a Londres, que ens explicarà el programa UK Food Retail, un programa que també ajuda empreses catalanes a que puguin accedir en aquest país, que comencem ara la segona edició. En tercer lloc, tindrem la intervenció de l'empresa Eurofoods. En Diego ha participat en el programa UK Food Retail i ens explicarà la seva experiència tant amb el programa com amb el mercat, com ha pogut accedir a diferents compradors. I, per últim, tindrem un petit espai de preguntes i respostes que ens podeu anar formulant al llarg de la sessió a la caixeta del xat que teniu a la vostra aplicació. Aquesta sessió serà en català, castellà i anglès i serà enregistrada. Això vol dir que d'aquí uns dies us farem arribar la sessió i podreu tornar a veure si us heu perdut alguna part d'aquesta sessió. Per últim, i abans de donar tret de sortida al webinar, per aquells que no ens coneixeu, nosaltres som Això. Això som l'Agència per a la Competitivitat de l'Empresa de la Generalitat. Som una agència del Departament d'Empresa i Treball i donem suport a les empreses en diferents àmbits, entre ells la internacionalització. Dono pas als primers ponents. Tenim en Paddy Willis i en Louis Bedwell de l'empresa Mission Ventures. Paddy, Louis, thank you very much for being with us today. You can go ahead whenever you're ready. Okay? Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you, Mark, and good morning, everybody. My apologies, we will now be in English because my Catalan, let alone my Spanish, is non-existent. So let me just quickly share my screen with you. Hopefully that is now visible to you all. So yes, good morning. My name is Paddy Willis and I'm the CEO of Mission Ventures, and I'm delighted to be talking to you today about how you could go about entering the UK market. So we will give you a short overview of our business and of the UK market, look at some of the key trends, and hopefully give you some tips as to how you could go about approaching this market, which is a substantial European market and is often considered to be one of the most innovative and challenging to enter for new brands. So very briefly, who are we? Well, we call ourselves Challenger Brand Builders. As a team, we have extensive experience personally of building new brands from scratch and exiting them successfully. We have well over 80 years, sadly, and that's why there's so much grey hair. And yes, we are also a very tall team. We're most of us over 6 foot. So we have a lot of experience in the industry. We've, as I say, built some of the iconic brands that have been very successful in the UK. And that's led us into some other partnerships, including with Warburton's, which is the UK's leading bakery business and actually the most purchased food brand in the UK market. And we also work with several impact investors on addressing how healthier challenger brands can impact on childhood obesity. But that's not our topic for today. Today, we want to talk to you about our home, the UK, some iconic symbols that you might recognize. And I should say I put James Bond on there because today is the release date for the new movie that has been much anticipated. So 007 is again on our screens at the cinemas from tonight. But we're a large country. We are one of the largest populations in the UK. I think Spain, by comparison, is about 47 million. We are the third, or when we were in the EU, we were the third largest economy. And we have a healthy GDP per person. Relatively low in unemployment. When I last looked, we were around about 4 to 5%. And I know that's, well, my last look for Spain, I think that was over 10, maybe even as high as 13 last year. But although food and drink is the largest manufacturing element of our the largest manufacturing industry. It's equivalent to the aerospace and automotive industry. We do still import just over half of our food. So that is the opportunity for you as exporters to foreign countries to look at the UK market. And I'm going to hand over now to Louis, who's our head of operations and has worked very closely with the Catalonian team to give you some insights onto the trends and data. So I will pass on to Louis now. Thank you. Oh, my screen seems to have frozen. There we go. Sorry, I've gone back too many. There we go, Louis.
That's it. Thank you. Thank you, Paddy. Good morning, everybody. So the UK market is, in terms of food and drink spend, is around 5 times the size of the Spanish market, and is growing. Total food and drink spend is around £234 billion, growing a few percent each year. But the biggest prize, one that we want to focus on today, is the retail market. That's food and drink and non-alcoholic drink shopping on this graph here. And that's about £106 billion in the UK alone. And the retail market on the next graph, you'll see is concentrated very much just on 4 retailers: Tesco's, Asda, Sainsbury's and Morrison's. And they make up about 66% of the market share. But over the last 12 months, with all of the disruption we've had of the pandemic and of Brexit, a lot of that market share transferred, or a little bit of that market share, sorry, is transferred to Ocado and independent retailers. So for new brands entering the UK, for exporters looking to target the UK, this is really exciting, because those smaller outlets, smaller retailers, are often the easiest for you to access. And the UK is quite, as you can see, fragmented market, and it has a consumer base that's aging, and population growth is slowing. Long-term international migration is the main driver of the UK's population growth, and that's slowing down as well. In the next 50 years, there's predicted to be an additional 8 million people that are over the age of 65 in the UK, and that's the population of London. So you have to really think, how do your food and drink brands, how do they serve this aging population? But despite the kind of trend in our population, there's still a huge, or this power for the young people, for the millennials, pre-family, and they're really looking for brands with purpose. And when we talk about purpose, what do we really mean? Purpose. Thank you. The purpose means, what's the reason that a brand really exists? How do you seek to have an impact on people's lives and the world that they live in? And the most famous example or the most recent example I could think of is Tony's Chocolonely. So they make really high quality, well-branded, delicious chocolate bars, but their main aim, their main purpose is to eradicate slavery from the cocoa industry. I'm sorry, I'm just going to change something on my sound. I've been told that my voice is breaking up slightly. Can you hear me? Carry on. Purpose. Sorry. Despite these two consumer groups, the aging population and the young, high-spending millennials, there are some things that remain consistent throughout. And consumers really want products that meet these 3 circles. They want things that taste great, good for them, and are convenient. And products that hit that sweet spot in the middle will be the ones that succeed. And when we talk about convenience, that's not
that can mean anything that fits into a consumer need within their lives. And we see these three kind of core principles come out in the top trends within the UK market. And some of the things that we've noticed in the past 12 months are the rise of at-home indulgence. People were unable to eat out in restaurants, so we've seen a huge rise in restaurant meal kits and subscription boxes, things that deliver high quality food to people's houses. And the rise of everyday health. So in the next 12 months, there will be some quite strict government legislation come into place in the UK that's going to ban the promotion of high fat, salt and sugar products. So there's a big push at the moment to make everyday products, treats, biscuits, confectionery, chocolate, to make it much healthier. And if you're not able to do that, there's possibility that your business will be less commercially successful or attractive to retailers. We've also seen, and I'll touch on this a bit more, the continued rise of online shopping. And that's moved away from just your grocery deliveries to more specialist deliveries, possibly alcohol, or as you can see here, the vegan kind, which is a specialist vegan supermarket selling exclusively vegan products. And something that's been very pertinent and topical for us all is health and immunity. And we've seen this come away from supplements and vitamins and minerals, something you might buy in a pharmacy, to more everyday food items. So as Paddy said, one of our partners, Warburton's, the most purchased food brand in the UK, the largest bakery, have just added vitamin D to one of their bread products. The market and these trends, they remain after what has been a roller coaster 18 months to 2 years. First we had Brexit, the pandemic, and I'm sure you've all been laughing at us over the last week as we queue up for hours to put petrol in our cars. But what does this mean for the future, especially for the food and drink market? Well, we're seeing that things are almost back to normal. So over the past 2 years, you will have seen a huge spike in people purchasing food in supermarkets around the start of the pandemic. That's when people started to panic and stockpile. They couldn't eat out in restaurants or buy food to go. And this kind of fluctuated throughout the next 12 months. And then as restaurants and cafes and people returned to the workplace, the food spend dropped off. But what we're seeing now is that things are almost returning to normal. And that's the same for the way people are shopping when they're in the shops. And we're seeing that now around almost half of this spend is done in a weekly shop. So what we would call a trolley shop on the next slide. And 45% of shopping trips are now considered weekly. And that's up around 8% in 2 years. So really it means people are spending more, but they're shopping less often. So that means that when you're on shelf, you have to really stand out, because people are being much more loyal to products and spending less time shopping around. But despite this kind of growth in traditional grocery retail, we've still seen this online growth. Online shopping is here to stay. Again, there was a huge kind of boom around the time of the pandemic, but it started to level off, and most of that growth has continued. And as I said, that's really exciting for young brands coming into the UK for the first time, because these online channels are easy to access. They're a really good way to test the market without investing too much money. So all of that is quite positive, but we're also seeing some negative signs of the pandemic. And one thing that will become even more important is pricing. So some experts recently have said that inflation within the UK could soar to about 4% in this year. That will, of course, impact low-income households, so the really mainstream consumers, but also it's going to have a big financial impact on the older shoppers. So the graph on the right-hand side shows that for kind of elderly consumers between 190 to 260 pounds a year, this inflation will have an impact on their food spend. So don't forget that the UK's got an aging population, so price will become really important, which is going to make doing business in the UK even more challenging. So what does all of this kind of data that I just talked about, what does it actually mean? So very simply, after the pandemic, behaviour is returning to normal, and the growth in online sales remains, and it's very easy to access new brands. But one thing not to forget is that price is going to become even more critical. So you really got to think about how much does your product sell for, and can you as a business make money? And the main thing is that consumers are shopping less often. So competition on competing for their attention is really challenging. Everybody is competing for those eyeballs, those 3 seconds on shelf. So how do you overcome this? You know, we think that to really stand out, you must meet a clear consumer need and think like a startup. So that means to start small, to plan really well, and build your way up. And I'm going to come back to Paddy now to talk a little bit more about how we might recommend that you do that.
Thank you, Louis. And my apologies, some of the slides have jumped around. My key seems to stick, and it's doing it now. So hopefully I can move the slide forward. There we go. So question, what challenges are you going to face? So we've got a bit of a picture now, hopefully, of the UK market at a sort of macro level. You're intending to look at bringing your products to this market, and clearly you now have a little bit of knowledge, but there's obviously a lot more to understand, not least about your category and the trends within that category. But it's not just about that, it's also what are the economic drivers that would make your product launch viable commercially. There's no point having a product in the market if you're not making margin. Louis made a very important point, which we'll come back to, about thinking like a startup. And I'll speak in a moment a bit more about that. But what is actually your best route into the market? It's not always obvious where you would start. And then, of course, there's always the operational challenge of how would you manage the relationships long distance. So I want to talk briefly about how you could start. And the first really important message is to realize, and any of you that are already exporting to overseas markets will recognize that the home market, your domestic market, is not the same as export, even if the language is the same. Now, this I'm sure will be very familiar to Mark's team in any of the overseas offices. So there's a example message that we see all the time from trade commissioners, which is they get emails from brand owners saying, I want to come to the market, please can you get me the name of the buyer for my category at Tesco's, Tesco's being the largest retailer. Sadly, Tesco's probably don't want to talk to you. So to Louis' point earlier, you need to start small, and you need to really find a way to get a toehold into the market. And it's really important that you're building a brand, not a product. Anybody can build a product, but the brand is the element that connects emotionally to your consumer and builds that loyalty. You also need to really work out what it is that you're going to offer to the retailer that's going to incentivize them to want to list your product. And I'll come back to this point about thinking like a startup. It doesn't matter how long you've been trading in your home territory, but over here, your competition is actually not the major brands that are on shelf already. It's all the other startups that are looking to enter the market. Go on slide. Okay, bear with me. This is not wanting to play ball. Oh, okay, come back. So, as I say, most people want to start here with the big retailers, Tesco, Asda, Sainsbury's, and Morrison's. The reality is that you need to be thinking in year one about where you can start to have an impact with the smaller retailers, where there's an opportunity to start to build a loyal following and get the qualities of your brand across to the consumer. So we recommend starting looking down here. Louis mentioned already about Ocado. Ocado is a business we know well. We've launched over 100 brands through Ocado in recent years. It's the UK's leading specialist online supermarket. And because of that, they have an opportunity to launch many more brands because they have the space, because they don't have shelves. So part of our role is to help coach people as to where they would go looking for their early adopters. And the important thing to bear in mind here is this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. So the reason that the big supermarkets don't want to talk to you initially is because you're one of many who are shouting for their attention. Clearly, if you're going to be going to a major supermarket over time, you will need to have all the right technical certifications. I'm not going to run through these now, but you can see on this slide, and I believe this will be available to you after, the sort of things that you'll need to have in place. So don't assume that having things like ISO 9000 certifications will be adequate for this purpose. And this is your average supermarket buyer. They're often actually very young. They change role in the UK, certainly almost annually. And they are besieged with people like yourselves trying to sell them product. Over 10,000 products a year typically are launched in the UK. Roughly 8,000 of those are variations on an existing product, but 2,000 of them are brand new. And that is your competition. It's the people who are launching new brands, new products, who are challenging the big brands, the big food companies on shelf. So it's not about whether or not the supermarket buyer is taking a Heinz product or a Danone product off of their shelves because they're selling very well. It's where is the opportunity to bring further value to the category. And my slide is stuck again, 1 second. So the buyer who's sitting in this chair here is wondering, with all these people shouting at him, sorry, this is not working well. Come on, please slide. Basically, what they're considering is the question about how is your brand going to add value. Oh, here we go, gone all the way through. So how will your brand add value to their category? The only way, there are only 3 ways that can happen. One is that you're bringing new customers to shop in that aisle who don't shop there currently, or you're encouraging those who are shopping there to buy more or pay more. And also, you've got to be really clear that you're communicating communicate that how your brand is going to fulfill an unmet consumer need, because that is what is going to drive those other 2 actions of people buying more product for more or bringing new customers into that category. If you're just another Me Too olive oil or something which just has maybe a nice packaging, etc., it's not going to be enough to motivate the buyer to want to list your product. We're going to go through the same problem, I think, now. Yep, oops, hang on. Oh, what's happened there? Give me 1 second, I'm going to stop the screen share and try again. Right, where are we got to? Here we go. Okay, hopefully you can see that again now. So you've got your listing. You now need to think about how you engage the consumer and how you bring them forward to be purchasing your product on a repeat basis. So that's when you'll be looking at how your social media is going to engage, what kind of sampling activity you can do to bring consumers into the store or pick your product off shelf, and how you're going to reward them for...
Paddy, hi, it's Mark. We're seeing your desktop, not your PDF presentation.
Okay, my desktop is very untidy, so that's not helpful. 1 second, right. Let's try that again. Right, let's try that. Okay, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. We see this slide that says find your brand champions.
Yeah, you think by now, after all this experience of Zoom and things, we might be better at this, but there you go. So I mentioned I won't dwell more on this slide because I'm conscious that time is moving on and I need to continue to get to the conclusion here. But so one thing I would recommend that you consider is how you could, if you're coming to the UK, to enter your products into the Great Taste Awards. I've been a judge for these awards. They're very hard to win, but they are a really good endorsement, both for retail buyers and also for consumers, that the product has been properly vetted and is considered outstanding in its class. And you can get 1, 2, or 3 stars. 3 stars, I can tell you, very, very hard to get. But it does give enormous credibility to a brand, particularly if you're an unknown entity in the market. Briefly, I won't dwell on this, but this is an example of one of my co-directors, Nigel. He was involved in a business called Ape Snacks as a co-founder. He and his co-founder had hit upon the idea of bringing coconut products to the UK because coconut water, etc., was very large at the time. But the product they found from Thailand was sliced, fried, with added sugar, and it was not very inspiring packaging and branding. So they transformed it into a brand called Ape. They looked at how they can make the product healthier. So they baked it, they added salt and made it a savory product rather than sweet. And you can see from the numbers there how substantially the product tweak and the branding made a massive difference to the performance of the brand. So that's talking about how you understand your local market and how you can adapt to suit the consumer's need. Damn one little fella. Let's go. Right, last slide. In summary, so we've talked about understanding how your product is going to meet that consumer need and how you're going to bring that early adopter community towards you. And that is where you can work with smaller retailers, online, etc., to start the communication process. And please don't assume and don't be disheartened if having made an approach to a major supermarket, they say no. What they really want to know is that you've been validated in the market and that UK consumers are engaging with you. Clearly, you need to make sure at that point you have the right certification, and do consider using that last example of how you might want to tweak your branding and possibly your product to meet the local market need and be sure of standing out. But as I say, the most important thing is to think that don't imagine your competition is the big incumbent brand. It's all the little brands, people that we work with who are competing for that shelf space that is really your competition. So my apologies for all the technical hiccups in this. I'm going to stop my sharing now. And hopefully we will be able to take some questions from you later on.
Thank you very much, Paddy. Yeah, I think we had these little technical details, but overall, I think the presentation was excellent and we put forward very well. Bon dia a tothom. Soc l'Òscar Martí, el director d'oficina a Londres, i després del que ens ha explicat en Paddy i en Lluís sobre el mercat del Regne Unit, el que voldríem fer és explicar-vos el programa que hem creat per donar resposta en aquesta situació en què tenim un mercat doncs, molt interessant, però que al mateix moment doncs, és especialment competitiu i requereix de suport sovint per entrar-hi. Em sembla que veieu bé ara mateix la meva pantalla. Deixeu-me repetir, en el cas que em passa el mateix que en Paddy. Molt bé, crec que sí, i si no, m'aviseu pel xat. Molt bé, perfecte. Doncs hem creat aquest programa que, com comentava en Marc a l'inici de la presentació, és un programa que l'any passat el vam iniciar amb una primera edició, amb mode pilot, i que el resultat hem decidit seguir amb aquest programa d'accés al mercat d'alimentació retail, comerç minorista del Regne Unit, i que té especialment la vista posada també a arribar a la gran superfície on ens explicaven en Paddy i en Lluís que hi ha un camí a recórrer que és més una marató que no pas un sprint, però que en qualsevol cas anem amb la vista directa. És un programa que es centra també en una anàlisi, en una capacitació de l'empresa al llarg del programa per ajudar-vos a poder ser capaços de crear un concepte de producte que desperti l'interès d'aquests grans compradors. Quan parlo de grans compradors em refereixo a aquests buyers que s'estava referint al final de la presentació en Paddy. els buyers de les categories, estiguem parlant d'un gran distribuïdor wholesaler o sobretot d'una cadena de supermercats o alguna gran cadena de gran reputació, com de les que vèiem al principi de la piràmide, tipus un Selfridges, un Planet Organic. En aquest sentit, el que també tenim en aquest programa és un programa que està estructurat per fases i amb el que cas a cas estudiem la situació de l'empresa, però el que volem oferir és la possibilitat d'incorporar-se en el programa en el moment més idoni per l'empresa. I, òbviament, és una col·laboració entre Això i Mission Ventures en el que en tot moment l'empresa participant està respaldada tant per l'oficina d'Acció a Londres com per Mission Ventures a través d'Empari en línia. Es dirigeix, i en línia també amb el que estàvem escoltant, a empreses que tinguin un producte diferenciat. El producte, com dèiem, del Me Too és especialment complicat de fer-lo entrar al mercat si la proposta no s'està diferenciant del que ja existeix. Tenim unes recomanacions també afegides, on parlem d'una experiència prèvia en exportació. He parlat també algun comentari de Brexit, cosa que tampoc és sorprenent quan parlem de Regne Unit avui dia. I l'experiència en exportació és recomanable en el sentit que si bé segueix sent possible vendre al Regne Unit, hi ha algunes dificultats afegides, salvables, però afegides en el moment d'exportar després del Brexit, en el que sempre és recomanable comptar amb una mica d'experiència en aquest àmbit. Parlem també de productes ambients, preferentment. Es pot revisar cas a cas i, òbviament, si tenim productes congelats pels quals veiem potencial al mercat, s'acceptaran. Senzillament ho fa més senzill al moment de la cadena logística i per fer el testeig i tot plegat. Les certificacions crec que hem vist un slide bastant interessant d'Empari on ens explicava el que estan acceptant els compradors, amb el que tingueu en compte. Un IFS sempre serà benvingut, un BRC encara més. Si estem per sota, hem d'anar en compte. Hi ha algunes certificacions, com és l'equivalent a un SALS al Regne Unit, que també seran acceptables, i el que també va cas a cas és que si el producte és molt interessant pel comprador, solen ser una mica més flexibles, sempre que hi hagi, òbviament, uns mínims a nivell de certificació. Els 12 mesos mínim que veieu aquí des de l'alta de creació de l'empresa, al final és per aquest recorregut que demanàvem. Estem intentant portar marques al mercat. Una pregunta habitual també pot ser si aquesta empresa ja està venent en quins mercats està i ni que sigui el mercat nacional, quin recorregut ha tingut aquest producte. Estem transmitint com aquest producte pot aportar interès en el consumidor. I una facturació mínima que l'hem posada en un nivell força inicial de 5.000 euros. El programa s'estructura en dues fases. Són dues fases on tenim també el cost de cada fase en aquesta slide. I, com podeu veure, la intenció és iniciar amb la primera fase del programa a finals d'any, de cara a tenir-la enllestida cap a principis del 2022 i poder-nos ja, en aquells casos on sigui possible, iniciar la segona fase més d'àmbit comercial. La primera fase es basa en tenir un bon estudi executiu on estem identificant a què ens estem enfrontant en aquest mercat. Estem parlant d'identificar competidors, el posicionament de preu, on s'estan venent els productes, quines certificacions creiem que són necessàries. Estem també fent de forma molt interessant un testeig digital del producte que el fem a través d'un proveïdor tercer que es diu iPad, en el qual el que fem és poder fer una enquesta sobre l'interès, el potencial interès d'un consumidor local. Tenim al voltant de 500 respostes de consumidors de Regne Unit per veure fins a quan estaríem disposats a pagar per al producte de l'empresa catalana. Tenim un parell de preguntes incloses. Cas a cas també podem veure si fos necessari afegir alguna pregunta per interès a l'empresa, perquè ho creiem idoni. no està previst ni és necessari des del principi, però només per dir que és flexible en aquest sentit i es poden fer preguntes addicionals en un cost que és el cost directe que es proposa el proveïdor tercer, que és de 200 euros. Llavors, després de fer tota aquesta anàlisi, les recomanacions d'accions correctives, si és el cas. I normalment, si estem entrant a la primera fase, doncs serà el cas. I aquestes accions correctives són elements com els que veieu aquí, relacionats amb el que pot ser el cost, amb el que pot ser un dels aspectes també sovint força, diguem-ne, challenging per l'empresa, com és el packaging. També de si cal fer modificacions per fer el packaging més atractiu, fer formats diferents, potser fer mides més petites de producte. El missatge que volem transmetre, estàvem veient l'exemple que ens ensenyaven al principi de la seva presentació amb aquesta empresa Walwortons, que és de les bakeries més venudes, la més venuda del Regne Unit, on molt atractivament ressaltava la D de la vitamina D incorporada. Tots aquests elements que són possibles tenir en compte de cara a crear un producte especialment atractiu. I, òbviament, a partir d'aquí al final, a partir de tot això, veure quina és l'estratègia comercial més idònia, quina priorització de contactes dins d'aquesta piràmide que t'ensenyaven a la presentació, hauríem de prioritzar. Tenim un producte al qual podem començar a fer contactes amb la gran superfície, tenim un producte on hem de començar a buscar més grans wholesalers, distribuïdors, per entrar i començar a crear una marca en petit comerç. Podem anar a algunes cadenes ja bastant líders i reconegudes dins del mercat, com el suplement orgànic. Això és el que definim en aquesta estratègia comercial, per on volem començar. En el cas que un cop ho tenim llest, tenim el producte que creiem que té més potencial al mercat, entrem llavors a la segona fase. Una segona fase que, aquí com veieu, confiem desenvolupar al voltant d'uns 3 mesos, però que heu de tenir en compte que podem estar parlant d'un recorregut llarg. De nou, aquesta idea que comentaven en Lluís i en Paddy de la marató. Pot ser que ens trobem que la revisió dels productes és al cap d'uns mesos. Porta temps i això és important també perquè l'empresa ho tingui present i és possible que llavors puguem veure quines accions paral·leles podem anar fent per entrar al mercat, potser començar a prioritzar algunes compres més petites per després avançar cap a la gran distribució. Això, òbviament, és un programa pensat a mida per l'empresa, amb la flexibilitat d'adaptar-nos a les necessitats concretes que tingui cadascú. Aquesta segona fase, un cop hi som, s'estructura de la següent manera. Hi haurà un workshop digital online sobre la gestió de la categoria del producte, al voltant d'una hora i mitja, per entendre dins d'aquella categoria concreta que ens interessa com es gestiona a la gran superfície i com entenem així també el raonament del buyer, del comprador de la superfície. No parlo del consumidor, parlo del comprador. Tenim una part molt important, també que hem anat veient en aquest primer any, en ajudar l'empresa catalana a la preparació del pitch comercial pel comprador. Entendre el que vol sentir el comprador, crear la presentació que respon a aquestes principals inquietuds que ens desperta el comprador i que preveiem que sigui una sessió virtual inicial amb un grup d'empreses del voltant d'una hora, però a partir d'aquí farem probablement un parell de pitch a nivell individual amb les empreses per veure i donar tot el feedback possible a la seva presentació. A partir d'aquí, farem el contacte amb els compradors principals, en els quals en Mission Ventures, i gràcies també a tota aquesta experiència tan llarga al mercat i amb el suport també d'Acció, farem presentacions fins a 10 principals compradors de supermercats, distribuïdors, wholesalers, segons la necessitat individual de nou que tingui cada empresa. Com dèiem al principi, lligant-ho tot, el que volem és aprofitar el temps de l'empresa, deixar ben clar quan hi ha una oportunitat de mercat i poder aprofitar-la al màxim per tenir les màximes possibilitats d'èxit de poder vendre al mercat retail d'alimentació del Regne Unit. Un mercat ple d'oportunitats, els més atractius d'Europa, però que al mateix temps requereix d'un suport especialitzat com els que us volem oferir amb aquest programa. I em sembla que fins i tot acabo amb temps, amb el que així ens donarà també més temps per respondre preguntes concretes.
Moltes gràcies, Òscar. Tal com comentava l'Òscar, recordeu que teniu la capseta del Q&A aquí a la vostra aplicació per anar-nos fent preguntes que resoldrem al final de la sessió. Entrem a la tercera intervenció d'aquest webinar. Tenim en Diego Pacheco de l'empresa Eurafoods, que ens explicarà una mica la seva experiència amb la participació en el programa i també amb el mercat del Regne Unit. Diego, hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo estás? Buenos días. Gracias por estar hoy con nosotros.
Buenos días, Marc, y gracias a todos por la invitación.
Quería empezar preguntándote un poco sobre tu experiencia participando en este programa con nosotros. ¿En qué aspectos crees que te ha ayudado Això y Mission Ventures en la entrada en el mercado de Reino Unido?
Sí, mira, bueno, nosotros comenzamos a trabajar en el programa a inicios de este año y yo creo que la ayuda la resumiría en tres grandes temas. Uno es el entender el mercado, el conocerlo más en profundidad, cómo operan los distintos retailers, cómo es la competencia, la actual oferta que hay para la categoría. Luego, en una etapa más tardía, la creación de un documento, un pitch comercial, porque por un lado nosotros entendimos el mercado, pero al momento de ir y presentar la marca y la oferta, hay que tener un discurso y un pitch muy trabajado y en eso, en el trabajo con Luis, ha sido de mucha ayuda para nosotros. Y por último, pero no menos importante, ¿no es cierto?, que es el goal final, es en la presentación a compradores. Para nosotros muy relevante el poder entrar en contacto con compradores de los grandes retailers en UK, y también ahí con la ayuda de Això y de Mission Ventures hemos podido iniciar esos primeros contactos.
Muy bien, gracias. De hecho, ligado con esta última parte que estabas comentando, ¿nos podrías explicar un poco sobre con qué contactos estáis, qué tipo de contactos estáis hablando, para que está siguiendo la oportunidad para la marca Euro en el Reino Unido?
Sí, mira, nosotros ya tenemos una primera presencia en el canal especializado, en tiendas especializadas. Por lo tanto, nuestro objetivo ahora es ir subiendo, como veíamos en una de las presentaciones, ¿no es cierto?, este triángulo de ir subiendo de tiendas especializadas a los grandes retailers. Y por lo tanto, hoy nuestro foco está en entrar en contacto con los compradores de grandes retailers. Waitrose, Asda, Sainsbury, bueno, los nombres que vimos en la presentación, ya con la intención de dar un paso importante en el mercado y tener una distribución a nivel nacional.
Muy bien, porque vosotros tenéis un producto que también es diferencial, ¿no? Tenéis un producto que bueno, sigue las tendencias actuales, ¿no? Todo el tema de la proteína alternativa, y entiendo que está despertando interés. ¿Veis interés por parte de estos retailers?
Sí, o sea, a ver, es parte también esto de entender el mercado de UK. Como dices tú, es una categoría que está creciendo en España, en UK y en el mundo entero. Y por lo tanto sí hay interés. Y la propuesta de nosotros de valor también tiene cierta diferenciación que la hace más atractiva para un potencial comprador. Pero eso no significa que sea fácil, porque UK es hoy por hoy, para la categoría de carne plant-based, es el mercado más grande en Europa. Y eso obviamente es una oportunidad, pero también es un desafío por la competencia que hay ahí.
O sea, pues esto también va ligado con la tercera pregunta que quería hacer respecto a los retos, ¿no? ¿Cuáles son estos principales retos que consideráis que tiene el mercado de Reino Unido para vosotros o para cualquier empresa que se esté planteando entrar en este mercado?
Sí, mira, yo creo que, y esto para todo, no solamente para el caso de Eura, es un mercado muy grande y lo veíamos en las cifras también en la presentación anterior en cuanto a la categoría de food o el retailer en general, cuando veíamos que cinco veces España. Esto es una gran oportunidad, obviamente, el tamaño de la oportunidad lo hace muy atractivo, pero al mismo tiempo cuando tienes en un mercado este premio por delante, van a haber muchos que van a querer estar ahí también. Entonces la competencia es importante, ya yendo en el caso particular de la categoría en la cual está Eura, hay muchos competidores, muchos más competidores que en España. Los retailers también están mucho más avanzados en la creación de sus marcas blancas. Por lo tanto, hay que ir muy bien preparado y muy claro para poder competir ahí. Y por otro lado, y que esto también no solamente es para la categoría en la que está Eura, sino que general para todos, hay que tener en cuenta que los timings son bastante lentos. Las conversaciones con un gran retailer puede tomar varios meses. Existen además ventanas de trading, pasar de una a la otra pueden ser algunos meses, y además hay que entender que, por lo mismo que hablamos, con tal tamaño, un Tesco, un Sainsbury, con el tamaño de negocio que gestionan, los compradores seguramente reciben cientos y cientos de requerimientos por semana, así que hay que tener paciencia también porque el timing es un reto importante en el mercado.
Sí, eso me parece muy interesante, ¿no? Tener en cuenta que muchas veces pues, la empresa piensa que contactando a un importador o contactando a un retailer directamente va a ser fácil o va a ser rápido o que vas a tener una respuesta rápida aunque sea un no, ¿no? Y muchas veces no tienes ni la respuesta y otras, desde que empiezas a hablar con este retailer hasta que se acaba pues, materializando algo, pues pasan meses, ¿no? Esto creo que es importante que las empresas lo conozcan. La siguiente pregunta que teníamos era, bueno, también relacionado con esto, de qué te aporta el servicio de UK Food Retail para hacer frente pues, a estos retos, ¿no? Es el reto de la competencia, el reto bueno, que es un mercado grande.
Sí, bueno, y creo que un poco lo comentaba en la primera pregunta, ¿no? Desde el entender hasta el entrar en contacto, en obtener al inicio detalles de cómo funciona el mercado a nivel de categoría, pero a nivel del retailer también, que es muy importante. Considerar qué canales, cómo atacar el mercado en su inicio y quizás cómo evolucionarlo a través del tiempo. El pitch, como decía, también es muy importante. El tiempo de los buyers vale oro. Si tienes una oportunidad de presentarle a uno de ellos, la presentación tiene que estar on point totalmente. No puedes perder esa oportunidad. Y luego también, bueno, el finalmente concretar esa reunión, el entrar en contacto, como decías tú, escribirle un mail a un buyer de Sainsbury sin ninguna referencia de por medio, la probabilidad de respuesta es muy baja y que no depende de si el producto es bueno o malo o de la marca que uno está construyendo. La probabilidad de respuesta es muy baja por la cantidad de trabajo y requerimientos que ellos tienen. Entonces, poder ser presentados a través de, por ejemplo, en nuestro caso, a través de Louis, también eso acorta los tiempos y aumenta la probabilidad de éxito.
Muy bien. Y por último, ¿qué recomendarías a empresas que tienen interés en entrar en este mercado? ¿En qué crees que puede ayudarles a entender cómo funciona el mercado?
Sí, bueno, lo primero, entenderlo. Y lo he repetido en varias ocasiones en tus preguntas, pero es que es importante entenderlo. Y aquí, con el apoyo de la oficina de Això allá y con el apoyo de Luis o de Paddy, también puede ser muy importante. Pero entender, evaluar la oportunidad Ahora que las restricciones de COVID han bajado, recomendaría mirar el mercado, ver la oferta que hay, no quedarse solamente con una idea a la distancia. Es algo básico, pero que por la situación que hemos estado en el último año y medio, a veces podemos perder esta costumbre. Luego, trabajar muy bien la propuesta de valor. Como decía, es un mercado muy competitivo y por lo tanto hay que saber muy bien qué es lo que vamos a ofrecer, cómo vamos a construir la marca, porque necesitamos traer algo relevante, algo distinto para los buyers. Al final ellos van a evaluar qué vas a hacer tú para ellos en el lineal, qué va a ser tu marca versus otras marcas que hay en el mercado, y ser creativos, como decía Paddy, actuar como una startup, ser flexibles, ser ágiles para modificar si es necesaria nuestra propuesta de valor. Y finalmente, creo que un paso importante es, aunque el objetivo final sea estar en los grandes retailers y tener la distribución nacional, comenzar a construir pequeñas historias de éxito. Nosotros lo estamos haciendo con tiendas especializadas como Planet Organic, The Vegan Kind. ¿Y esto qué sirve? No solamente aprendes del mercado, vas viendo cómo tus productos se adecúan o no al consumidor local, pero también recopilas información, datos que puedes luego mostrarle a los compradores y demostrar de que tu marca es relevante para el consumidor en UK. Entonces, estos pequeños pasos, estas pequeñas historias de éxito son relevantes para después incluir en el pitch, como hablaba antes, en el pitch comercial, incluir que ya estás ahí, que has dado los primeros pasos y que estás teniendo éxito.
Perfecto, muchísimas gracias, muy interesante. Con esto entrem a la última fase d'aquest webinar, de les preguntes i respostes. Començarem a veure... la farem en anglès, aquesta. Paddy and Louis, there's a first question for you. I'm just going to read it out loud. Rob Martin say, we have an ongoing business in the UK and have created a structure as a non-established trader, allowing us to keep working with customers who are not set up or not willing to import goods themselves. We are now in the process of negotiation with the logistics 3PL to safeguard predictable delivery delays and make our customers' life easier. However, we have a hard time finding capable and motivated sales agents to develop our UK business further. Especially now, we haven't been able to go to trade shows for some times. What would be a good starting point to get in touch with non-exclusive agents or brokers?
Yeah, it's a good question because a good agent is a little bit like finding a needle in a haystack. They're very rare. We do know a few people, and I put a note in the question chat to Rob to say we could probably help introduce you to 2 or 3 people that we personally think are good as independent sales agents, if that's what you're looking for, Rob. Clearly, if they're overloaded, as often they are, they may not be able to service you directly, but they may be able to introduce you to people within their networks who they could personally recommend. There are also some very good wholesalers, but they're quite tricky to get hold of because there's so much competition already within the UK market. So I think the best thing is to find somebody in country who can represent you and who is motivated to see the success of your business, and therefore would be the intermediary that would work with both retailers and wholesalers. I hope that's helpful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. I'll try to translate. We have a couple more questions. I'll try to translate them. There's one that says, which evolution perspectives we are to expect from Brexit?
Brexit.
That was a mandatory question, I think.
Yeah, of course. So it's a really hard question to answer, Mark, because I think we're still finding our way with Brexit. I think what is sure is that as consumers, we haven't changed. So we're still very discerning about quality. Louis mentioned about health, convenience, and taste. If you're in a position to service that, then you have every chance of succeeding here. I don't think we are going to pull up the drawbridge and stop importing food. We can't. Over 49% of our food is, or half our food is imported anyway. So anybody from Catalonia has just as good a chance as anybody else of being in that half of our food imports. So I think there will be probably some continuing issues with regards to lorry drivers, but then I understand that's not just in the UK, that's a Europe-wide issue these days. So I think be prepared for some rocky times. Clearly COVID's not helping with people not being always in the office, etc., and that's not always helpful for trying to talk to buyers. But overall, I would say, we maintain an optimistic view. People will keep buying, they need to eat. And particularly as we've not been able to travel, I would say that the opportunity for foreign foods, for world foods, is increased. So people are wanting to experience at home the things that they can't enjoy on holiday. And obviously the UK has been a long advocate of holidays in Spain and the Spanish islands. So I think Spanish brands have a very strong opportunity.
If I may add to what Paddy was saying, Mark, also from our experience, we don't see the buyers unwilling to, or showing less interest in new products. But there are precisely, when it comes to the real impact right now of Brexit, we can see it mainly in the logistic impact. So we're seeing some delays. We're seeing Rob was also in his question saying that they register as a company so they can act as an importer. So this is also referring to the trickiness of exporting to the UK now, which is not as simple as before. It's not impossible. It's not very difficult, but it is more difficult than it was before. So this is something that from our experience in the past year, we're always discussing this a bit further with companies and helping them to identify some logistics partners. And this is something that basically needs to be kept in mind from the beginning, especially for those smaller companies with less experience.
Okay, thank you. There's a couple more questions. There's one regarding the program. Maybe that's for both of you, for Mission Ventures and also for Això London. Regarding the contacts with big retailers, is there a chance to close or schedule a visit with buyers in each category, or do we contact them it's a cold call, and if there's interest, it goes forward?
Yeah, really hard. I mean, the word that I always use when it comes to trying to talk to any buyer, but particularly a supermarket buyer, is persistence. You will probably not get a response to your emails. You certainly won't get a response to any voicemail. I think they just have voicemail. It never sees the light of day, never hears the light of day. So in terms of, if you're a brand that's, if I've understood the question, if you're a brand that's across multiple categories, then your best bet is to try and find one avenue, and it may be you try several of each category until you get one meeting or one conversation, and that may lend you the opportunity to introduce your brand to the other category buyers. But again, it's very, very competitive, very hard, as we were saying in the presentation, and I wouldn't focus too much now on the supermarkets. As Louis was saying, it's much easier to get listings with the smaller independents. They're more likely to meet with you, particularly if you have traveled. Supermarkets won't take a meeting unless you're an extraordinary brand that they may already know about. So I would suggest focus on the smaller retailers first, and then once you have a story of success, you can then use that as your key to unlock the opportunity with the supermarkets.
Mm-hmm.
This is a question that we, most companies, always ask us, and I little bit as a joke, but I always say even if the buyer was my family relative, if they're not interested in the product, they wouldn't go and take a look at it. So as long as you present an offer that makes sense, something that clearly and related to what we've been talking about during this presentation, that is of interest to the market, You need the persistence that Patty is saying, like you keep sending emails, you keep maybe speaking to other buyers, you keep trying. Usually, also from my experience, when the product has like some, when the product fits, you get a response. Then you need to deal with, timings. Maybe it's in 3 months' time that they're going to do the review. And I think it's the case with Euda as well. The people we've been contacting with Louis' help. I think we get answers. We get answers from them, but and it's like other things to keep in mind. Maybe it's not the right time. Maybe it's a bit later. Maybe it's fantastic, and let's talk about it. But it all comes down to the product.
Thank you. We have 2 more questions. One of them, we don't really have time for them, but Gonzalo, we will answer to you later. We've got your email. One last question, it's from Andrea. She asks that we have been talking about retailers and not that much about distributors. Do you think it's, do you recommend using them to enter into the market?
Sorry, Mark, I was just slightly distracted by another question.
No, the question was
about using distributors.
Yeah, that if you recommend accessing the market through distributors instead of retailers directly.
Yes, absolutely. The question is finding the right distributor, and they obviously are themselves proactive in looking in overseas markets for brands they can represent, and obviously are being approached the whole time. So again, in a way, the message is not wildly different. You have to help them to understand how they are going to sell to the retail buyer by meeting an unmet consumer need. So that is just another iteration, another step in that journey of that storyline. But yes, certainly if you can find a distributor, often we recommend that you find somebody on the ground who's motivated to work with you. Could be independent. We for example, work with a logistics business that has a back office function, so they can take small pallet loads, store them centrally. You own the stock. They have the customer code with many wholesalers and retailers. And then as you or your agent sells through, it goes through on the same invoice. And then when they've been paid, you get paid. So that's quite a good way. And I'm not sure if that was what maybe Rob was suggesting that they're doing, but that's a good way to get started. And that's where you can start to supply some of the smaller retailers and wholesalers, build your bridgehead of credibility. And then that's the time when you can go to distributors and say, I'm already doing business with Planet Organic or Whole Foods, etc. And that gives them the confidence to take you on, because for them it's going to be a bet that you will succeed in the market. But if you can demonstrate some success already, then that will help.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for your answers. Amb això acabem la sessió d'avui. Us recordem que aquesta sessió doncs, ha estat gravada, per tant, d'aquí un parell de dies us farem arribar un enllaç i tota la informació que hem estat parlant. Dir-vos també que si teniu qualsevol dubte o qualsevol consulta ens la podeu fer arribar a nosaltres, no només pel mercat de Regne Unit, sinó també per altres mercats. El meu correu em sembla que ha sortit a sota abans, però en tot cas és marc.moreno@gencat.cat i em podeu fer arribar les preguntes que creieu del sector d'alimentació i begudes i les podrem fer arribar a qui calgui i intentar resoldre-les. Moltes gràcies per haver-nos acompanyat i ens veiem aviat.